Now that things have somewhat settled down in Oxford, Mississippi, we're going to take you through some of the later stages of the process in the mode of thinking by Keith Carter, not just with the Lane situation, we've covered that, but as they were looking forward to the next hire and how that all played out. A reminder, though, to give us a subscribe, if you would, hit the subscribe button so that we can continue to keep this free and allow us to grow. We really would appreciate all of your support and help. And want to thank our friends at Big Fork Brands. Today's video is sponsored by Big Fork Brands. Get 20% off using our link, which is pinned right below in the comments. Well, we have exhaustively explained Ole Miss's position in the entire Lane Kiffin issue. I have said I believe that Keith Carter was had to have, even though he kept saying positive things. What is he going to say when he's asked about, do you think Lane's going to stay? You can't say no. You can't say, well, I'm not sure. You can't say, I hope so. People are going to read too much into that. He said, I think he's going to stay. Did he believe that? I hope he didn't, because all signs clearly were saying that Lane was not going to stay. Look, when you have a coach that's coveted, but is certainly going to be looking at an opportunity, you need to understand that while you may think, if you're Keith Carter, Ole Miss is the best place in the world, there are other programs that are going to be more coveted by a coaching candidate. But yet you don't want to mess with the season, which is an extraordinary season that they have had and continue to have as they're going into the playoffs. You didn't want to mess with that. So there's difficulty. You don't want to do things publicly, but I do believe, in fact, I know that they did their homework on at least who they liked. I do think John Summerall was someone that they targeted, former assistant at Ole Miss. Obviously, I think John would have taken the Florida job over Ole Miss if both were being pursued. But I do think Keith was in a difficult spot because you can't, quote unquote, hide John Summerall until Lane has made his decision public. So it was very difficult. Now, I do think by virtue of the fact of talking to the agent community that maybe there wasn't enough progression towards, look, if Lane leaves, we'd really like to talk with you. Could you hold off a little bit? We'd like to have this conversation. I think, and I know it's hard to keep things quiet, but you can do it. I've seen it done. I've seen it done this year. You could have those meetings. You can have those conversations with an agent that basically you're interviewing, you're getting things lined up and saying, look, we don't know what Lane is going to do. But if he does leave, you're our number one guy, and here's why, and here's what we want to do. I think going a little bit further with that behind the scenes would have probably helped Ole Miss. I don't know that it would have made that much of a difference because at the end, everyone was waiting on Lane. But I do think, for example, on Saturday night, when Keith got word that Lane was not going to come back, I think he should have put it all in high gear and tried to wrap up bringing in John Summerall for the permanent head coaching position. There's a reason why that didn't happen, though, and I've talked about it before. Ole Miss was in the most unique spot. Most of these coaching hires or because an opening is there because you didn't have a good year. Maybe you're going to a lesser bowl. Maybe you're not going to a bowl. Ole Miss is clearly going to the playoffs. We know that. We know Lane's not going to coach it. Keeping this staff together for the playoffs was the number one priority for Keith Carter. I know in my heart of hearts, as much as he likes Pete Golding, I think if he had the time and he could open it up to anybody, I don't know that he goes in Pete Golding's direction. I think he would have been a candidate. But because Pete had such an impact on the current roster at Ole Miss, he was an ideal guy to lead them. But Pete wasn't going to stay there as a coordinator. He had an opportunity, two opportunities. One, he could follow Lane to LSU, or two, which he didn't want to do because he didn't want to leave the team. But if he had to, he would have. Or he also could have left at the end of the playoffs because he was going to coach the playoffs regardless. You make me the interim, fine. I'm going to do a deal, and I'm going to make a deal with Florida, and I'll coach through the playoffs. Florida, John Summerall was interested in hiring him as defensive coordinator because that was understood. That's why Pete got the job. There was a lot of talk that maybe Joe Judge would be the guy because he's got head coaching experience in the NFL. That maybe he would be the better head coach, and then allow Pete to handle the defense. As it's turned out, Pete's still going to run the defense, be the head coach. Players love him, and the fact that he's committed long-term, they committed to him, he's committed to them. We're going to see how it plays out. It may work. They may have to go down this stretch where they're having to look in a few years anyway. But now what's going to be interesting to watch, and I've mentioned this before, Charlie Weiss Jr. is coming back to Oxford to prepare Ole Miss's offense for the playoff run. They have an offer, a very fine offer, to Charlie Jr. to stay at Ole Miss. What is he going to do? Yeah, he's, quote unquote, maybe told Lane and LSU that he's coming back. It may be what he'll do. I don't know. But there are a couple of things that Charlie has to consider. One, if he goes with Lane, LSU, and have success, I do think he's going to get that job, big job, maybe get a head job, and that's what they all want to do. But there is some people, fair or unfair, that will always credit Lane with the offense and not Charlie. And so the other school of thought is be your own guy, work for a defensive head coach in Pete Golding, and just like Pete had control of the defense, Charlie would have control of the offense at Ole Miss going forward in 2026, I'm talking about. That might kind of show that, yes, this is mine, and I can do this without the benefit of a safety net with Lane. The two things he's going to consider. The money is, it's going to be an offer. I'm sure it's going to be similar. I don't expect a bidding war, but it's going to be substantial offer from both. It's going to be a couple of $1 million a year. But it's going to come down to where he sees his future and how it's going to play out going forward. I would say that my evaluation of the Pete Golding hire is that's the best they could do under the current circumstance for this year. I do think even the interim role would have put those defensive coaches in a position where they are preparing for the playoffs, but let's face it, not knowing if they have a job beyond that, they would have to carve out some time to figure out where they're going to be in 2026. By eliminating that with the defensive staff, you keep things together in the playoff run, And while they're going to have to make some adjustments on their offensive side of the ball, the main guy has been allowed to come back and coach him. So I think all things considered, they did a good job. In other circumstances where you had a normal search, yeah, I think you get somebody like a John Summerall or an Alex Golich, which I think may be better prospects to be a head coach in the SEC at this time than Pete. I understand why Pete is the best fit for Ole Miss at this juncture. Appreciate you joining us. Hit the subscribe button. And again, if you would, check out our folks at Big Fork Brands. They sponsor today's video. Get 20% off using our link, which is pinned below in the comments. Hit the subscribe button. Keep this free. We appreciate you joining us. Have a great one, everybody.